Welcome to the Healed Approach podcast, the place where bold ideas meets real action in sustainability, inclusion and innovation. I'm Rebecca Heald, and each episode I sit down with industry trailblazers from architects and construction leaders to change makers across the board to uncover transformative strategies driving a greener, more equitable future. Whether you're here to learn about passive house standards, embodied carbon, or how inclusion sparks innovation, this is the podcast to inspire your next big move. Ready to challenge the status quo? Let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Healed Approach podcast. And today I am joined by Sophie Sleight. Welcome, Sophie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thinking about it, and I've just thought about it now. We're not a million miles from each other, so I don't know why we didn't do this in person. But anyway,
next time.
Yeah, it was a slight oversight on my part there. But anyway, Sophie is a design engineer at Viridis Building Services. And Viridis Building Services look at sustainable design and net zero opportunities. And they are here in, actually, is it classed as Lincolnshire where you are? Are you classed?
So we're postcode is Nottinghamshire, but we're on the Lincolnshire border, so we're actually closer to Lincolnshire than we are Nottinghamshire.
Yeah, it's that kind of like you say, that grey area, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, Sophie, I know Sophie quite well. We've met each other, and we've also delivered workshops for children at the Construction Week at the showground recently. So I know what Sophie is all about, and that's exactly why I've asked her to come here on the podcast. So, Sophie, let's just get started. First of all, can you explain a little bit about what you do? Because, I think one of the reasons that I really wanted you to come and support me at the showground was because I don't always think that people understand what it means to be an engineer, particularly a design engineer. So can you explain a bit about your role, what you do?
Yeah, so there's different types of engineers out there, but for me in particular, so I'm a design engineer. So we focus more on the drawing side of things. So we start from REBA stage 1, where we look at the design brief, and then we'll go all the way through to REBA stage 6. But our main focus is REBA 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we'll take the drawings, calculations, and the whole design through to that stage where we'll pass on the information to contractors on site. They'll then deliver the works from what we've designed. So we try to get involved as early as possible because that's where you make the biggest impact. So we try and look at the building as a technology itself, rather than just the systems that we're installing. So I kind of start right at the start of the project. So it's nice to get involved in a lot of the design choices, such as like windows, the building volume, so we try and get the best volume out of the space, get the proportions right, and that kind of thing. So a lot of my role is working on a project right from the start.
Amazing. And I know I asked you this question actually when we were delivering at the showground, but do you, just for the purpose of the podcast, do you tend to, because there is a lot of I suppose there's a lot of retrofit going on at the moment, and that kind of thing. So is that something you tend to get involved in, or do you tend to see projects through from the beginning? What does your work kind of tend to make up? Yeah.
So what we normally focus on, we do both retrofit and new build. The retrofit, that's more challenging. That's quite enjoyable to go through because you've got the constraints then of having to deal with what's already there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what also makes it interesting, is the fact that you've got a shell that you've got to work from. You've got to fit it within the constraints, especially with the new regulations that we've got as well. And we need to make sure that these new buildings and existing buildings are both decarbonising at the same rate. So we work on both new build and retrofit, but yeah, so we've got a few examples of both, but I think the retrofit is particularly interesting.
Yes, and I'm glad you've said that, because I do know that you're doing a project at the moment locally, I think at the college, aren't you? Where
yes, we are, yeah,
decarbonising Lincoln College. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Because we talk about decarbonisation, and I've been involved in quite a bit in that with clients. But can you explain, because I don't think people, it's a word and it's almost becoming a bit of a buzzword, I think. But what does it actually mean?
Yeah, so decarbonisation, it can range from small things to big things. So decarbonisation can be turning the lights on and off, making sure that you turn your computers, TVs on off of standby and turn them off at the plug. That's like the small things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also look at things like your carbon impacts on putting the right levels of insulation in. So at the minute, a key thing that for us is that buildings are over-insulated. We're going too far sometimes. So what we do is we look at that Goldilocks amount. So we get the right amount. It's not too much, not too little. So we make sure that we get the right amount of the building so that we're kind of getting that carbon locked in the building and we're not over-insulating it and increasing our carbon footprint unintentionally. But as well, decarbonisation is making sure that we've got efficient systems. So it might not be the right time to upgrade your system in the building, but we would look at using what you've already got to make that as efficient as possible. So it might be improving the windows, not necessarily taking out the full unit, but just replacing the glass. That can make a big impact. That can mean that your heat losses are reduced, which means its system you've already got can run at a lower rate. So it's not just about ripping everything out and replacing it. It's using what you've got and making those small adjustments to make a bigger impact.
Yeah, interesting. And I think I like the point that you made there actually about how decarbonisation starts with the really small things. Because I think that's a really important point to make, because I think sometimes we can kind of think about it on a bigger scale and kind of get a little bit overwhelmed with it. But like you say, it is the small things done consistently over time that make a big impact.
Yeah, but definitely.
And we kind of tried to get that across to the students, didn't we, when we were at college at the construction week. And I think just to go back to what you said there about how when you over-insulate, obviously that is increasing your carbon footprint. Can you explain? Because obviously, back in the day, before I was in the industry, I would have just thought, like, whack as much insulation in as you can. Let's make it as, I do know that that's not the right way after doing an extension on my house and what have you. But, I guess, can you explain a little bit about why and what kind of impact that does have if you're not getting that sweet spot?
Yeah, so if you say you've got a building and you've got a cavity wall, if you go anywhere above 100, that's not normal practice. So a builder is going to have to take out special measures to increase that cavity anyway. So that in turn is making your building harder to build. So that's going to increase costs, first of all.
Okay.
The next thing is that if you've got, say you go from 100 mil to 200 mil insulation, you've doubled the amount of insulation. The returns off that aren't going to be double. They're not going to be anywhere near double. So to get that sweet spot, you need to find, because you kind of get a curve, it kind of hockey sticks out. You need to find that sweet spot between the two amounts. So from our research, we found that about 100 mil is the ideal amount in any building with a normal wall makeup, and that keeps the construction typical. It makes it easier for the builders. It will bring costs down, and it also means that you're not transporting as much. So to get that insulation to site, if you went from 100 to 200, you're going to have to travel twice as far. You're going to have heavier loads. It's also got to be manufactured. There's processes involved in that, and that's also going to increase the carbon content of the insulation as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for explaining that.
No, that's all right.
And I guess kind of when you are, what's the biggest, so I've been working on with some clients, who are looking at decarbonisation of a lot of housing projects, housing estates, etc. And I guess would insulation be one of those things that was most important there, or is there any? What would you say? I guess it would be something that would be quite a common theme to be doing in these situations.
So I would say probably insulation is one of the biggest impacts that we see, because I think when you're talking individually, building by building, it's not a big impact.
Yeah.
But if you've got an entire housing estate, say you've got 400, 500 houses on there, and all of those houses have put twice as much insulation as what they actually need, the surface area of that amount of insulation is massive.
Yeah.
And if we can go on an entire housing estate and halve the amount of insulation, there's massive cost savings, massive transport savings. It increases the footprint internally of the building, because buildings aren't going to grow outwards.
No.
They're going to grow inwards. So you're going to lose space. So you put more insulation in, they're not going to extend the building out, they're going to bring it in. So you're losing your internal area. So if we can decrease that, we're also increasing the amount of area within a house, which also means you can sell it for more.
Yeah.
Just little gains like that. It's has quite a big impact when you think on a housing estate wide scale. That's a really big impact. But it's not just insulation, it's things like windows, getting the right size windows. So we also have a look at getting the right proportion of window sizes, because smaller windows internally you need more artificial light then. So if we can increase our window sizes by a little bit to get more daylight in, we can then reduce the amount of lighting that we need inside as well. So that also has impact on your lux levels internally as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because I was going to mention about glazing and windows, because I think that's definitely been something that we've been looking at in terms of the schemes that that my clients have been looking at. And I think that important point that you made there about getting the right window sizes, getting the right proportions and things, again, they're things that make sense, but are not always something, because I think a lot of the time we think, decarbonisation means, taking out gas boilers and doing X, Y, Z. And it might do, but it's not all about that, is it?
No, we have to think about the building, using the building as a technology first before we then do this. So if we can think of the building as a technology, we can reduce the amount of technologies going in. So the more we consider the glazing, the insulation, all of those sort of things, simple things like opening windows rather than having an aircon system.
Yeah,
it's easy things like that, because we can almost, what we try to do is engineer ourselves out. So we're trying to help ourselves by reducing the amount of engineering works that go into a building by considering these fabric improvements to start with.
Yeah, of course. And on that kind of theme, I know obviously Viridis, you're, very passionate about net zero, about, making sure that we get there. But can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and what that means for you and for the built environment in the UK, or, nationally and locally?
Yes, I mean, net zero is not about having straight away a net zero building. For us, it's how we get to that. Okay. So it's looking at the journey on to net zero. So when we're looking at a project, we don't always try and propose the best net zero option straight away, because it might not be affordable. Okay. What we would do is propose a route on how to get there, and we would make sure that what we're proposing is interchangeable. So when we design a heating system, it might be that they've got an existing boiler that they want to keep using until that's end of life. So we would propose that the radiators are sized correctly for an air source heat pump, and the system is designed for an air source heat pump, so that when that time comes, the boilers can be just removed and the air source heat pump put back in. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to make sure that these processes are as easy as possible, make sure that when it is time to reach net zero, the building and the client can do so easily. But we also try and make sure that what we're doing doesn't have to cost a lot. Mm-hmm. So we often find there's a bit of stigma that net zero has to cost a lot of money and it's expensive, I can't afford it, that kind of thing. But we find that our designs are usually about half what our contemporaries offer. So we kind of try and promote designs that are not necessarily cheaper, but they're more efficient. So they're going to save you money, not necessarily straight away, but in the long term, they're going to be more effective and they're going to be cheaper to run long term.
Yeah, and I'm pleased you've touched on that as well, because I do think there is still this mindset or misconception, I guess, that to be more sustainable, to achieve certain standards, it's going to cost a lot of money. And that's not necessarily always the case, is it?
No, it's not. I think what we find on projects, we surprise a lot of people on how much cheaper it is to do these options. So I think it comes from the fact that we're saving money on glazing and the insulation, and because we're looking at things pragmatically, we often find that they weren't expecting the prices to be so low. And as well, I mean, there's schemes out there that help fund projects as well. There's the SALEX funding scheme. There's various other things that can help with funding projects. So it's not necessarily that they're unfundable and there's no help out there. There is help out there, and we try and use the money as best we can to get the best options as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point as well, because I don't think, a lot of people are not aware of those schemes that exist. But also as well, how do you, because one thing I kind of come across myself is that as soon as I start talking to somebody who, has always built in a certain way, has always done things in a certain way, when you start talking about sustainability, they are often closed to the idea. And I think it's kind of, how do you draw them to even looking into it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Because, and this is going to bring me on to actually a question that I do want to, something that I do want to delve into after this, because I do think that we need to be thinking about, and this kind of brings us full circle, because we do need to be thinking about how we are encouraging more people to come into the industry and how we're encouraging that diversity, that innovation, that open-mindedness. So I guess my question really is, how do you, or do you try and, I suppose, encourage somebody to look at these options when they are pretty fixed in their mindset that they're not going to be affordable or suitable?
Yes, I mean, what we do are various different things. So what we offer is CPDs to clients as well. So we can talk them through net zero, the regulations, what that means for them. And so we try and make sure that they have an understanding of what the best options are and kind of the misconceptions around the building regulations, because there's only 4 lawful requirements in the building regulations. So there's not actually that much you need to do to make sure that you meet them. So that's something that we offer to clients, is to make sure that they fully understand it. We also, when we're designing, try and stick to the norms of the industry. So as I say, with insulation, we make sure that we don't go any more than typical wall construction, just to make sure that when they're on site, the builders know what they're doing and there's no details that need to be outlined in that sort of thing. So we kind of make sure that what we're designing is industry norm, but using it innovatively, so that we make sure we get the best of what we're trying to do. And we just kind of talk to clients, ask them what they want, ask them what they're trying to get out of the building, because they might want one thing and we can advise them and say, well, that might not work, but if you look at it a little bit differently, we can get this from it, and potentially a route that they didn't think they could go down to get to net zero, it might be options there, and they might be able to get there sooner than they think.
Yeah, and I think, I think something that really comes through with that is about building the relationships with the clients, and I think the CPD, it's that educational piece, isn't it? Because I do think that in order for lots of things in the industry, and not just the construction industry, but just workplaces out there in general, there needs to be more education, awareness, knowledge. Because I do think that a lot of the resistance comes from a fear, a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness, and maybe not, like you say, having a partner, can, and I always say this when I'm working with clients, we have a partnership. This is about us working together. It's not about you saying, no, you can't do this or you should do this. It's like, let's find the best solution. That means that we're not completely disregarding, traditional standards, but we're moving it forward innovatively. And it's interesting, actually, because I kind of talk a lot about the link between sustainability and diversity, inclusion and diversity. Because for me, sustainability is about thinking outside the box. It is about thinking innovatively. It's not just about, achieving certifications and ticking boxes. It's about how we can look at the best situations for what we're in. And I think for that, we do need that diversity of thought, don't we? And that's why we need inclusive workplaces. And I'm trying to think about the best way to articulate this, because you're an engineer, right? And I think in some cases, engineering can be a little bit more black and white, okay? And, somebody did challenge me about this the other day, and I'd be really interested to know your thoughts on it. because I do think in terms of what you're doing, in terms of what I'm trying to do, and in terms of what a lot of people in the construction industry are doing, we need that diversity of thought. But if you're just doing something that doesn't need that, if you're kind of, I don't know, an engineer who is engineering something that's just sticking to, a particular way of production or manufacturing, then do we still need that diversity of thought? I don't know. This is just a conversation that I want to open up, and I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, when you're looking at anything, I think there's always going to be a better way of doing something. So it might not be big changes, it might be small changes, but I think when we're doing anything, there's always going to be a better way of doing it. So I try and think of things more creatively and think of things a little bit different than a typical engineer of, this is a process, I'm sticking to the process and I'm not thinking outside the box. That's what we're trying to encourage in the engineering world, is to make sure people are thinking a little bit further than just, this is pipe work, it needs to go here. It's kind of thinking, how can I get this to work in a different way that might not necessarily be the typical way, but we try and do that within the constraints of the construction world and make sure that we're doing it alongside typical industry standards. But I think there's always going to be an improvement on something. So where we are now, in a few years' time, we might have changed it because it might improve. It's the same with regulations, technologies. That's an ever-changing world as well. So technologies are always getting better, they're changing. When we work on projects, we try and introduce, we call them destination technologies when we're working on projects, just kind of wow products. So there's things like the solar smart flower, kinetic pave gen, which is a pavement that you walk on that produces energy. I mean, they're really early in their technical manufacturing methods and kind of where they are in their point. But in a few years' time, that might be the norm. We might be walking down the street and producing energy as we're walking.
Yeah.
There's new ways, new things that have been introduced, and I think there's always going to be that change.
Yes, and I love that point that you've made there, and I could not have articulated it better myself when I was challenged on it. Because I kind of was a bit like, well, there's always a better way of doing things, and you're absolutely right. But it's like, but what if, do we always need that? Is there always a need for diversity? And I'm like, well, there's always a need for inclusion. So if there's always, But I guess this does bring me on to this whole idea, or this whole topic, of how we get that into the industry. How do we get more people involved in the industry? Because like you said, there are so many amazing technologies that are going to make things better. They're going to make, our lives better. They're going to, save the planet, so to speak. And we can quicken that up if we're getting the right people, the better people, the talent into the industry. So what do we do about that? How do we do that?
Well, I think it's probably down to we've maybe got this mindset that engineering is technical. It's really technical. There's loads of things to get your head around. I mean, yes, that is part of it. That's a big part of it. But there's also how we communicate that back. So it's understanding the technical side of it. You also need to be able to relay that back to people and kind of explain how things work to them. Because I think a lot of people think knowledge is power, and it is in some ways, but I think we need to share that. So we need to make sure that other people are involved in this power, because the more we share our knowledge, the more power we've got. So the more people know things, the more things are going to improve. You get different sights on things. It might be that if you're explaining to something for someone in a different industry, they might think, oh, there's a new way of doing that. I'll use a process that I've used in my industry, and I'll take that forward and help you in that industry. And there's kind of an overlap between industries. We all follow processes. So it's just understanding how these processes work, and we can all work together and get the best solution for everything.
Yeah, and I think, again, something I've spoken about again recently about this whole thing, this idea that knowledge is power. That's only a part of it, isn't it? Because it's only power if you do something with it, and it's only power, like you say, if you use it for your own, growth, advancement, etc., but also as well share that knowledge. And and I think we need to be sharing that knowledge. We need to be sharing that awareness. We need to be making other people understand what it's about and what the industry looks like. I mean, I wish I wish I'd known 20 years ago, the opportunities that there were in the construction industry, because I think, I've taken a very different path. I love being in the industry now, but I think I would have been in it in a different guise had I known sooner. So we do need to be encouraging that more, I think, as well. We need to be, enabling parents, teachers, young people to think along those lines, I think, if we're going to see that drive forward.
I think we need to encourage people that engineering isn't just one sector. The construction industry isn't just one sector. There is so many things out there that you can look at related to all those different types of industries. So, I mean, we say we're engineers, but we look at sustainability, net zero. That's just one part of it.
Yeah.
You've got installation, you've got manual work, you've got different construction. There's so many different industries out there, and we need to encourage more people to look at what they might be interested in, because there's bright minds out there, and we need to get them helping out and and get them on the same pathway.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that kind of also as well, thinking about, and I guess, in terms of what you are doing and in terms of, how you are trying to innovate, well, you are innovating, you're not trying, what does that mean for Viridis though? What does that look like? Like how are you kind of encouraging that inclusion and that diversity within your organisation? Because to be able to do what you're doing, you must be doing that.
Yes, I mean, within our company, we've got a whole range of different backgrounds. We've got senior members of the team that've got loads of years of experience on site working on different projects. We've got new starters that are kind of fresh out of university that are just starting their careers. We've got a mixture of engineering backgrounds, industry backgrounds. My background's interior architecture. We've got people that are from different sectors, chemical engineering, project management, mixture of both male and female staff. We're 50-50 now for females and male engineers. So we've got a whole range of different backgrounds and different industries. I mean, some range from the technical side, some range from communications, some creative, and having those different types of backgrounds, we all kind of work together and use each other's strengths to get the best from the industry and from what we're doing. So we kind of all share knowledge and share power, basically.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a really important point. And, having kind of knowing your organisation, having done some work with your organisation, I do know that is something that you are really passionate about and something that is deeply embedded in what you do. And I think, again, it just really does exemplify the message that we need the diversity to be able to kind of drive forward through with the sustainability. So thank you. I really wanted to kind of pull that out, I guess. And your team's growing, right?
Yeah, we've got recently 3 new members and a 4th joining us the end of this month. So yeah, we're constantly growing.
I met one of your new members on Friday, actually.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. We've got always growing, always adapting, basically. Yeah.
No, amazing. And I think in terms of, I suppose, to link it again, in terms of kind of like the leadership and the culture that you're creating, I think, it speaks for itself. And where do you tend to work, by the way? Is it, obviously we touched a little bit on you doing stuff at Lincoln College. Do you work nationally or is it just locally?
It's mainly locally. So we're more based in East Midlands, purely for travel wise, trying to reduce our carbon footprint by not travelling too far. But it doesn't mean to say we can't work wider, because we are based in Collingham, so we've got a train station down the road, so we can travel to site quite easily. But we're mainly East Midlands based, Nottingham, Lincoln, pretty much no further than 2 hours away, really. That's kind of our range, really. But
yeah. Just in case anybody's listening and is wanting to get in touch. London's not far on the train from you.
No, London's just over an hour away. So London's not far.
Yeah. It's a lot easier for me to get to London than it is Manchester, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's easier to go down south than up north.
It is. Oh, don't get me started. Don't get me started on that. Like, yeah, if I'm having to travel anywhere north, I always have to drive. And I always think
Yeah,
that's not the best, kind of approach to take. Definitely not. But, it's just, unfortunately, that's where we're at the moment, isn't it? But
yeah.
so, in terms of like, if there was one thing you would love to see change tomorrow in the industry, what would it be?
I think I would say it's probably perception. I think we need to change perception of what people think is involved, and I think we need to make sure that we're educating people, because I think there's often, most of it is misconception of what's going on in the industry, and I think that is then passed on, and people probably through word of mouth probably pass on incorrect information.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we spread awareness and knowledge on what can actually be done and how easy it is to do what we're trying to do. I think we're trying to make sure that there's no misinformation spread, and we want to make sure that perception of what's going on in terms of net zero sustainability is the right direction that we need to go in, and people understand what they need to do in terms of what they can do to improve their individual journey, as well as the organisation that they're in. If you're a school, university, council, that sort of thing, it's making sure that there's that education there.
Yeah, because I don't know if this is something that you've kind of come across yourself, but definitely I have kind of noticed that it all depends on there being a person that does get it within an organisation. So I've worked a lot with, I've worked with small organisations, I've worked with, tier one contractors, I've worked with local authorities. And what I tend to see is that it's not because there's a particular, I don't know, framework out there. It just always tends to be somebody gets it, somebody feels passionate about it, somebody wants to move forward on this, and that's then where it will happen. It's not because there are any particular mandatory guidelines that anybody needs to be following.
I think that's true. And what we've noticed as well, there's normally someone that's going, no, this is the path we need to take. And I think having that within an industry and organisation, having an advocate of that journey that they need to go on is essential, and it's making sure that we get the information across to them so that they can then spread it to their organisation, and they can kind of build that wider picture as well.
Yeah, 100%. So we need those ambassadors, sustainability ambassadors.
Yes. We do. Yeah.
There we go. That's it. That's my new mission, sustainability ambassador. But I also do think that we need to be kind of encouraging that earlier on, because I think it's harder if we can get younger people, whether that's through schools, whether that's through their college or their university courses, kind of getting this and feeling passionate about this, then that's going to make it easier than trying to convince people 10, 20, 30 years into their career that this is the approach to take. Because even if they are convinced, even if they can see the benefits, it's sometimes kind of changing habits and ways of doing things, isn't it?
Yeah. It's about making sure that they're kind of got new habits, better habits, and making sure that they follow those as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sophie. Can you let people know where it is that they can find you, where they can find Viridis if they want to find out more? And maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we're on LinkedIn, so Viridis Building Services. You can find us on our website. Just type in on Google Viridis Building Services. We're based in Collingham, so our office door is always open if anyone wants to come down and have a chat, or just give us a ring, and we're always on the other end of the phone. So we're always happy to talk as well.
Thank you. Amazing. And definitely if anybody's interested in any of that CPD, they should get in touch for sure. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody who has taken the time to listen to this podcast. If you found it interesting, useful, please make sure that you do leave us a 5-star review, that you go check out what Viridis is doing, and that you also share this with your audiences, because this is a message that needs to be spread. So once again, thanks ever so much, Sophie, for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you all here again next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Healed Approach podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Let's spread the word and drive the change our industry desperately needs. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn or at rebecca-heald.co.uk. And as always, keep pushing boundaries and making impact. Until next time.